I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's the July 30th special called meeting, and I need to get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Was that Max?
Yes.
Could I get a second?
Second.
That was Donna. Thank you. And so now I need to do it by roll call. Max?
Yes.
Can you vote, please? Amy? Pat? Cindy? Donna? And Peggy? Here. All right, so that's all in favor. Now then, on the action agenda, we have the interim budget resolution for 2020-2021, and that's Ms. Frisbee, and she, is that correct? You gave this to us?
Actually, that is your budget amendment. The other was in your board packet already.
Okay. So, are there questions from board members concerning this interim budget resolution?
I have one question. Wow, that's really loud.
Cindy? Thank you, Ms. Frisbee.
So in the budget resolution, I saw that, do we need to adjust something? Just move it back, okay. I saw a note to the effect that if there are raises at the state level, the county has said that we can come back to them for increased funding. And I hadn't heard that before, so I was just sort of thrilled to see it, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about what we have heard. So maybe this is a question for you, Dr. Baldwin, or what has the county said to us in terms of if there are raises or bonuses at the state level, whether or not we can come back to them for more?
I think that was in the meeting that you and I had with the county manager and their budget manager. They kind of made reference to that, but that was back in April, so that may have changed under the circumstances, but I left it in there in the event that we would have that opportunity.
Could definitely occur, that again, because of the timing of this.
Right.
But I will also say there was no public commitment from the commissioners in the public setting. This was, as Ms. Frisbee said, that we did have that discussion with the county manager and the county budget planner.
All the more reason to have it in this document, I think.
Would it be valuable for us, since I know we don't have a finalized budget yet, but we do know some things that have been passed, would it be good for us, either from the chair's position or the superintendent's position, to have a memo, letter, email, something to whomever, chair, county manager, whomever, hey, this just happened. We had this conversation before. We just want to make you aware that as we know more, we're going to be coming back to you with more, as opposed to waiting for the point when we know more and then going to them.
Do that. I think we're still waiting on signatures from the governor on one of those.
We are. Everything is changing, I mean, as we prepare all this information, so until we know what the final budget's going to be, then we really don't know exactly where we're going to be for 2020.
Yeah, that's not what my suggestion is. My suggestion is we know the budget is going to be final. It's going to be different than what we know today, based upon some bills that have been passed that are going to increase some level of money for our employees, which is going to impact what we know today we have from the county. We don't know what that number is, but laws have been passed, and my suggestion is that it would behoove us to just have not a formal sit-down meeting, but just something that says, hey, Senate bill this passed, these are going to impact what our people make, and as we know more, we definitely want to come and sit down and have a conversation with you so that we can work this out.
Ms. Frisbee and I can work on that, and it probably is not a bad idea to include in the first paragraph a note of appreciation for the commissioners to come back and refund the match.
Very grateful for
Original
that.
request,
I was listening to the meeting. I was very, very grateful how that was voted on. So absolutely.
Are there other comments from board members or questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Chair, I move that we approve this interim budget resolution for 2020, 2021.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
I'll second.
This was Amy and Donna, so we squared that second. And it's a roll call. Thank you. That would be Cindy,
Aye.
Pat's got his thumb up, Amy,
Aye.
Max, Donna, Peggy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes. Budget amendment number 8, walk-in document, which is this long one that she just walked into us when we were in closed session. And are there questions about the walk-in document?
I do apologize for the late hour of that, but as I mentioned earlier, things are changing every time we do something, so we have to make changes. There's already a change in this document now, but it's okay.
You make a decision in the morning, and by noon, it's been changed. So that's just the fluidity of our situation.
And this basically just shows where we're proposing to end up as of June 30th. You do know that we have 2 months of accruals, is what we call them. So if you see funds remaining in the local budget and other budgets, that's because we will still be tying expenditures back that we make in July and August back to this fiscal year. So we have to allow enough in there to do that, so.
But usually there are some budget amendments for this year that will come in later months. Is that correct? So this is not probably the very last budget amendment?
We make every effort to make this the last budget amendment, but there are some things that, because of COVID-19, that we don't know about, that there is the potential we might have one more amendment.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my mask keeps falling. So, but we make every effort to make it as accurate as possible based on the best information at hand.
And in relation to cash flow, fund balance, and our federal portion of our budget, are we okay there in terms of operations as it relates to those items? Because that budget's an October 1 to September 30 budget. Are we?
Yes. we are.
You're comfortable with where we are there?
I am comfortable with where we are today. The best I could do, I'm sorry.
All right, seeing no other questions from the board, I would entertain a motion to approve the walk-in document budget amendment number 8.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
Second.
That's Peggy. And so now it's roll call. That would be Cindy,
Aye.
Pat, Amy,
Aye.
Max,
Aye.
Donna, Peggy,
Aye.
and me. Okay, so that passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Community High School CMAR closeout document. That's Mr. Fearley. Are there questions from the board for Mr. Fearley?
I didn't have any on this one.
I need to look at it again, but I think this was the one. Yes, I do have a question.
Okay, Tim, Cindy's got a question. We're not surprised.
I know you missed having me in the room, Ms. Franklin.
I know. I'm so glad you're here.
So could you just walk us through a little bit? Transfer remaining project funds back to the Article 4042 roofing contingency. I just want to understand all of that and any concerns. This just all seems very complicated to me, so I want to make sure I understand it.
It is complicated. The kind of unique thing with a CMAR contract, who's kind of your construction partner, is there's kind of a settlement at the end. So if you have pluses and minuses, going along, of course, the CMAR has to pay his subcontractor, so we get change orders to do that. But the markup of the CMAR, his general conditions and such are settled at the end. So that's a big part of this. As far as the funding for this project, it was equally complicated because when we bid this, it was really over the budget we expected when it was bid by the CMAR. So we did a number of things. We did a lot of value engineering. We took a lot of things out of the project that we had hoped to do to protect a pretty significant contingency, because we anticipated once we started renovating the old building that we would find things that were not visible and would add costs, and we certainly did, but not to the extent that we thought. So another way of making the budget work was we utilized some Article 39 funds from the greenhouse project that was countywide to do that. So that was another source of funds. We put some lottery funds into it, and we put some Article 4042 funds for roofing into it. So once it kind of all washed out, we did end up with a surplus of funds, very small for a over $12 million project, but the roofing ended up being a thing that cost less than we thought. We didn't find as many surprises in that we weren't required to replace as much roof deck and such as we thought. So that was really tough for the capital outlay committee to add funding to a project that had Article 39 money. And we basically sacrificed other roofing projects to make sure that that could happen. And it was in desperate need because we had put that off. So it seems logical to me, but that's your choice. We're falling behind on roofing to put the remaining funds back into the Article 39 roof contingency so we can address some of the existing conditions that we have across the county.
No concern then with the School Capital Fund Commission and returning money to them, or none of that is?
And every cent from that and more, lottery, the Article 39 and such.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure about. Thank you.
And the Article 39 from the School Capital Fund Commission was the majority of the funding for this project.
Oh, yeah, by far, right. Yeah, 95% of the funding,
that's what I
or
thought.
more.
Other questions from the board?
One question for clarification. Tim, on the very last page of your change order, the handwritten notes, I think I know what it says, but under item B, halfway down, you're pointing back to the 410,974. Recommend approval to, is that increased cost of the work?
Yes.
Okay. It was hard really to decipher.
Yeah, bad handwriting.
That's okay.
My secretary has a hard time.
I just want to
too.
be sure that's what the intent was.
But
Thank
this
you.
was, just so that you understand, this is just a reference for you for the large change order that you approved months ago.
Right.
And it demonstrates that only the cost of the work, the CMAR's cost to his subcontractors was approved. And now we're settling up with all the other CMAR costs that go on top of that, now that we know them all.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve the Community High School CMAR closeout documents.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Amy. It's hard to tell. All right, now we'll vote. Cindy?
Aye.
Pat? Amy?
Aye.
Max?
Aye.
Donna? Peggy?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Now we go to the next item on the action agenda, which is the entrance and lobby reconfigurations and the approval of the design team. Are there questions from the board on this? Cindy's shaking her head, okay? My
concern is just that Novus Architects, they're great, and it's been wonderful working with them on all of these projects, but they're starting to kind of pile up. And just wanted to hear from you, your thoughts about working with an architect we know we have a good relationship with, who works well with us, versus sort of spreading it out among other firms.
Well, I think we do try to spread it out, but there definitely is a corral of design teams that we probably work with more than others. We had, did I say how many respondents we had?
19.
It's in here, the list is in here, let's see.
We had quite a few. We had a lot of interest in this.
Yes,
And
and it
a
seemed like
lot
with
of
this
them were-
size project, it might be a good one to sort of try somebody different, because it's,
A lot of them were out-of-towners that would make it very difficult for us to work with them, because this is such a hands-on process, and we may be working on 5 or 6 designs at one time at different stages. So we did rely a fair bit, the selection committee, on the recommendation of our security consultant, who has some experience working with Novus Architects. And it did come down to 2 teams, and we not only looked at the architectural team, the plumbing, mechanical, electrical, the contractor partner that they had involved, their ability to, access control is a big thing, their relationship and understanding of access control, which is very complicated. So there's a whole lot of factors, and it came down to 2 entities, and it was kind of a tie, so we sent out some more questions to them, and they both teams did a good job, but we had to make a decision. But I think you're right. I think it's smart for the board to spread things around a bit. It promotes some competition, perhaps, and we see different things. But
and
in this
it deepens
case,
our bench, too.
pardon me?
It deepens our bench.
Yeah, and that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from board members?
I have one.
Yes?
Mr. Fearley, looking at this scope of work, I guess my concern is, and as you know, the evaluation that we had by the private company to come in, they visited each and every one of our campuses, 43 in total. Will this contract, are we contracting with a designer to look individually at each one of the 43 schools and theoretically be drawing design for 43 different designs potentially? Is that what we're doing here?
Probably every school will need some degree of something, at least to bring even the newer schools maybe up to a similar level ultimately, but very little in many cases. But some are huge. Some are relocating the office and are going to be really expensive.
Right.
So this scope of work is really unknown right now. We're going to, in a priority manner, work through what our study told us and try to bring everyone up to a degree, address the most, the most needs first, to try to get everyone up to a degree. And I anticipate that we won't just work on one school and that'll take 2 years, and then we'll probably do smaller things, but we need to have an overall game plan so that we don't do something now, bringing them up, that we'd have to tear out and redo, and we want to move everyone in that direction. So we're telling the design team what to focus on. That's our role and our security consultant's role. We're going to point them in a very pointed direction at what schools so that we can get a preliminary design so we know how much it costs, and then be able to go after funding, because we don't have the funding to do this work right now.
Understood. Now, by the design team, would they be responsible for moving forward with the architectural drawings?
Yeah, the design team consists of an architectural firm and a contractor partner that would act like a CMAR. So they can help dig in when we're kind of looking above the ceiling and working with maintenance on what the utility issues are and with technology department, that they'll be able to give us accurate costs and also, like in the CMAR process, help us make decisions that are cost effective. They're not making the design decisions, but if this is our goal, by working as a team, we can hopefully get cost effective. And also schedule is a big thing. That's huge, you know, to disrupt a lobby of a school, that's gonna be hard. So.
With the uniqueness of each campus, I would think that you would have to look at each campus individually.
Yes.
And it's almost like this is not just for, you think about the design team for entrance and lobby reconfigurations, but that's for actually 43 different building and construction
It really is,
projects that we're approving. And then they would follow this through construction as well as the design team and the architects, they would follow through.
They would be capable of actually constructing it with a CMAR contract.
Right.
Some of the smaller projects, we may want to just bid it out. But I foresee a level of schematic design happening first, with the architectural team kind of leading the design, with our committee and our security consultant reviewing, making sure we maintain standards and we check all the boxes of what we're trying to accomplish. But we'll rely on them to give us, you know, designs that make sense. And they were selected because they have some experience with that already.
Thank you.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the entrance and lobby reconfigurations and the approval of the design team. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Second. Donna? And so Cindy is a yes. Pat?
Yes.
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 That's Amy. And Donna? And Donna? Yes. I'm so sorry. Peggy?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. The next item on the agenda is Estes Elementary School additions and renovations, approval of the design team. This is also Mr. Fearley. Are there questions from the board? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Donna. Second?
Second.
Amy? And we will call the roll. Cindy?
Aye.
Pat? Amy? Max?
Aye.
Donna? Peggy?
Aye.
Okay. We'll move into, thank you, Mr. Fearley. We'll move to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is the personnel report with an addendum, the 2020-2021 CTE local plan approval, award of contract for liability, property, auto and workers' compensation insurance, renewal of student picture package, and mandatory student athletic insurance. Motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you. Is it Cindy? And then second?
Second.
Peggy. And so Cindy.
Madam Chair,
Sorry.
I have a question about one of these particular items. Now that you got your motion in second, is there room for further discussion? I have a simple question on one item.
I can give you a little room.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. I was looking at the mandatory student athletic insurance, and it looks like we are buying, or I guess requiring, the low coverage, or 3 levels, low, middle, and high. And if you look at the benefits of the low coverage, it is something, but I would be concerned that, I guess the question is that minimum, or could they make up the difference and go to the high coverage?
Tiffany? This is Miss Insurance.
I apologize, I could barely hear out there. I just kind of heard like the last couple of comments, so I apologize. Would you mind repeating the question?
I'll be happy to. I was looking at the athletic coverage, the insurance, and it has low, middle, and high as options. And it looks like what has been quoted is the low option. Now, clarify for me, every student athlete is required to have the student insurance, correct?
That is correct.
That is something that is the cost of that is being absorbed by the parents, is that correct?
Yes.
Does the school system, do we as a board or the school system, are we responsible for any portion of that?
So we actually go ahead and we get the quotes from this particular company, and then we pay in advance, and then Mr. Ball, who was actually just here a moment ago, Mr. Ball sends out a letter to all of the parents with the other athletic directors per each district and school, and so they actually have to pay that $5 or that $12, $5 for middle school or $12 for high school. So they're actually getting that money or collecting that money in advance, but we go ahead and then we pay for it. I think I heard the last part of your comment in regards to the low option. From what I have always understood, we usually try to go with the low option because going with the higher option may not be affordable for most of the parents.
I can understand that, but could that be an option for a parent that might want to incur that expense?
That is correct.
They
If that's
can do
something that they
that.
want to do, then they can come actually and speak to me about it, and then I can get them in touch with the company in order to do so.
Okay.
Typically, I haven't seen that over the past 3 years. They usually try to go with the lower option, but the only thing that we've seen with that is when a student does need to use that insurance, it may not cover everything according to their injury. So there is like that limit, I believe it's about $25,000 worth. So if they have something that's more than that, then it's definitely going to cost more.
Okay. Is this insurance considered to be primary payer, or if the family has health insurance, as an example, would this come in as a secondary payer only after the family's primary insurance had reached its limit?
So this should actually come in first since they're actually purchasing it. However, that's going to be up to the parent.
Okay.
So once the parent takes a look at the coverage of what they have as personal insurance for their child, and then take a look at this, then it's going to be up to the parent in order to make that decision. But even if they use their primary initially, then they can always use this as a backup.
And this is for the year, correct? It's not we're not charging it every spring and fall term,
Correct.
correct?
So this is for the year. So this
The
would
reason
cover
I ask
2020,
is because
2021.
the point you make, we want to make it affordable, but same token, some parents that may not be having total, coverage for their family,
Exactly.
but they're allowing their child to play sports, they might be able to pull together and get that high coverage for, pay the $50. But that would give them a whole year coverage for an accident should it occur, and they have nothing to fall back on.
Right.
So I just want to make sure they have the option, if they choose to do so, they could go to a higher coverage.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yes, they do. You're welcome.
Other questions? Then, let's see, I have a motion and a second. A roll call is Cindy?
Aye.
Pat? Amy?
Aye.
Donna? Peggy?
Aye.
All right, that passes. The consent agenda passes. Now, for the thank you, Tiffany. The next item on the agenda is information for the Buncombe County School reentry plans, and I believe Ms. Swanger is in charge of that.
We're going to coast.
We're going to do a duet here. Dr. Baldwin and Ms. Swanger, they're going to do the presentation of the reentry plan.
Okay.
Start out by talking a little bit about COVID-19. Has anyone heard that term recently? Saying that the impact of COVID-19 on this school system has been significant, to say the least. And I would follow that by saying that the level of significance and the intensity of significance for that impact in the future COVID-19 on our school system is notched up several notches. I think there's argument to say that we will be facing, probably could say we have faced the most significant challenge that this school system, along with other school systems across the state, have seen in their history. Look at this as the timeline, sort of a look in the past, look at the present, look in the future. And I'll tell you from a superintendent's viewpoint that we have learned one constant exists with the COVID-19 response. And that constant is change. It changes on a dime, changes in a 24 to 48-hour period. And we await a decision from our state and the governor that is scheduled for tomorrow that will represent, again, considerable change for us. March 16th, we began as a closed school system. I say closed, we weren't closed for instruction, but we had closed our buildings. And that lasted the entire 3-month period to June the 3rd. During that time, we put in place a remote learning program. Day one, March 16th, our child nutrition staff, with the help of bus drivers, teacher assistants, classified employees all across this district, began serving meals, breakfast and lunch, to all of our school families. Took the buses, traveled, went to where they were, especially those areas in tremendous need. We put a family resource center together in a short period of time that targeted our homeless population. Day one. On the fourth day, we took our traditional classroom instruction and we made it remote and virtual. From the standpoint of providing meals, 1 million meals were provided and served to our children and families from March 16th to June 3rd. I don't think I've got words to tell you how proud and how remarkable a job our staff did in providing those meals. Those child nutrition workers, the leaders in child nutrition, the classified employees that stepped up, rode those buses. I can't tell you the remarkable job that our classroom teachers did to transfer the traditional learning model to virtual. And they did it on a turn of a dime. I also want you, the board, and just as importantly, I want the public to know that we actually began planning, certainly the earliest plans I've ever been involved with for the future new school year. We began on May 21st. We put together a steering committee, and from that steering committee, we also identified 9 subcommittees, each with specific areas of focus. I'll talk to you a little bit about that on the next slide. But that, on May 21st, was put into motion. And thankfully, we started that early, because I will tell you to be prepared for August 17th, regardless of where the plan is that we start, as we find out tomorrow, that we need every single second of that planning to be prepared. On May 21st, we took the resources that were available to us. I think we looked at over 8 different states across the country and their plans on reentry. North Carolina came a little bit later, but I'm proud to say that, boy, they had maybe the most comprehensive plan that we looked at. So on June the 8th, at the state level, along with the governor's office, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services gave us our marching orders. And for those of you parents, stakeholders out in the public, you can go to our district website, because this particular document that lists the requirements for us to begin school in whichever one of the three plans, you can actually see that document. It is available. It is linked on our district website. It was called Strong Schools, North Carolina Public Health Toolkit. It listed the requirements. So that was an incredible resource for us to have at the time. And it was followed up on June 10th by our State Board of Education and Department of Public Instruction, because what they did is they put together a 117-page reference to support the requirements with recommendations, hands-on recommendations to operate the school systems. Again, tremendous value. So both of those resources were now available for our 9 subcommittees and our steering committee. I'm going to fast forward to July 1st. Hey, that's tomorrow. That's when we anticipate that Governor Cooper will, from a state level, declare which one of the 3 models that our school year will begin. Jump Start on July 15th. That is going to be, even though Ms. Reed, it has taken probably a year of her life already, we're actually going to have an opportunity to put quite a bit of this planning in place on the ground, because on July 15th, at 20 of our elementary school campuses, we will be providing a summer learning program called Jump Start. You're going to hear a little bit later about those plans that were submitted to the state for Jump Start. You're also going to hear about our remote learning plan. The state required us to put together a very comprehensive plan and send that to DPI, and under Mr. Pace's leadership, that document is ready to be sent. And then August 10th, we welcome our staff back, faculty and staff, and I think they will welcome, hopefully, fingers crossed, buildings open, back in more traditional business. And then on August 17th, that will be the first day for students as projected. Right button here. About enter. Okay. Good. Talk to you about the 9 subcommittees. And each one of those subcommittees had a specific area to focus on. Remediation, support, and Jump Start. Operations, facilities, child nutrition, and transportation. We're going to talk about the 3 plans, but I will tell you that of those 3, transportation was significantly challenged, especially when we talk about Plan B. And you're going to hear a lot about Plan B as we continue today. Policy, legislation, and funding. Student health, safety, social emotional needs. Employee health, safety, and social emotional needs. I love the thought that we included social emotional needs for not only our students, but our staff and ourselves, because I think that's going to be an area that we've got to focus on. Instructional support and delivery, including technology. The recommendations that come to you today come specifically from that committee regarding, again, when we look at that middle plan, that middle model, Plan B, what options that were recommended, will be recommended to you. Special student populations, communications and stakeholder engagement. And we've said from the start that regardless, because there will be so many decisions have already been made, so many more decisions to be made, including some that you will contemplate today, that when all the dust settles with those decisions, maybe the most important component of what we do to be successful is in communications. Because of the challenges we have ahead, there will be no greater time, I'm convinced, that we have got to communicate clear language. We have got to simply educate the basics to ourselves and to our publics. We have got to work in coordination with our parents. This is going to be absolutely crucial for any of this to be successful for our school system, as far as that goes, any school system in the state. And then finally, extracurricular activities, including athletics. As you are aware, athletics has begun, at least in a safe fashion with conditioning. I want to applaud the work of our countywide athletic director, David Ball, the work of the committee that also was co-chaired by Jim Lewis, a tremendous amount of work, and they put together just an incredible plan that I'm going to say, in reality, was the model that the state utilized in a number of areas. So we're very proud of that planning process. I also want to make sure that the board hears this loud and clear, that when you look at those 9 subcommittees, what that represents is not 1 or 2 people on each committee. It represented a total of 205 participants. That included 63 parents and community stakeholders. It represented 68 teachers, classroom teachers, as well as 14 classified employees. Another group that was certainly key to those subcommittees were our school-based administrator and district-level administrators. But that's important because, again, for us to be successful, we've got to make sure as we plan that we have a cross-representation of Buncombe County schools. We've got to make sure that our populations of students and families are represented, as well as our employees, because we have a number of different categories there. Okay. This is the basic slide that's been used in most all the state resources and documents. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. Let me go back to what I said to begin with. The one constant with the COVID-19 response is change. So keep this in mind. I think the state's wisdom in putting together this model was that it's a model that allows us to change quickly, efficiently, and effectively on the turn of a dime. Because again, that's the nature of this virus. And the nature of the response has to be, we need to be able to change in a short period of time. These 3 plans, from Plan A to Plan C, represent from the least restrictive environment to the most restrictive environment. Let's make it as simple as possible. When you think of Plan A, think about all of our students eligible to come into the building at the same time. Again, all in. When we look at Plan B, it's a hybrid. We have some of our students at any one time eligible to come in the building for instruction, while the remaining group of students are in a remote learning mode outside the building. Some in, some out. Plan C, which we became very familiar with as we ended the school year, is all out. Remote learning for all. Those are the 3 plans, and again, the concept is that we're able to transition and change fairly quickly from one to the other. Whether we go forward from A to B to C, or whether it's backwards from C to B to A, or from A to C, C to A. It allows that function of transition between them. Now, below in the fine print, I want to make sure the board hears this loud and clear because it is so important. Tomorrow, the governor will be making an announcement for the entire state, for all public school systems, that one of these 3 plans, this is what you will start in. It will be based based upon, theoretically, it's based upon the metrics of what is occurring across this state regarding the COVID-19 outbreak. How we are responding, how effective is the treatment and the testing. School districts may choose to implement a more restrictive plan, but may not choose to implement a less restrictive plan than determined through the State Health and Human Services, North Carolina School Board, and the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and I would include the governor's office. Because you need to keep in mind, regardless of which one of those three plans that Governor Cooper has mandated the state will be in, you, the local school unit, and the board, you have the option to move to a more or most restrictive plan. Let me give you an example. Worst case scenario. Let's say that in the middle of October, Buncombe County becomes the hotbed of spikes for COVID-19. As a result, we are in Plan A for the state, but because of our particular situation, in consultation, which is also an absolute key for us, we must stay connected with our local Health and Human Services Department as well as the Emergency Operations Center. We've connected back in May 21st. That was one of the first things we did. We stay in constant contact, communication with them. The board, out of your wisdom, may opt to move all the way to Plan C because of the stage that we find ourselves in this county. That may also extend to a single school. We could be in Plan B across the county, and one of our particular schools has an outbreak. In consultation, again, with Health and Human Services, the decision of the board may be we need to move that particular school entirely into Plan C, which is the more restrictive, and in this case, it's the most restrictive. That could be one of our 6 districts, because we could have multiple schools inside each one of those districts that calls or force the board to consider the more restrictive plan than what the full state is in. If you have any questions on any of this, because I know I think it's so important. We have got to make this as simple as possible. The difficulty is this is one of the most complex things I've ever seen as a superintendent. But we've got to work hard to simplify it, especially as we educate the public and educate ourselves. Got to put it in as simple terms as possible and use a lot of examples. Plan A, I'm going to show you 2 pages here, 2 slides. This does not include all the requirements listed under Plan A, but the reason they're important is whatever requirements we have in Plan A, remember I said that was our marching orders that we got from state DHHS, whatever requirements you have in A hold true for B. If we're in C, in remote learning, those requirements are sort of in virtual land, right, Ms. Swanger? But all the requirements in A fall under B. That's why, beginning about 3 weeks ago, our maintenance department, our principals, our school buildings were moving and currently moving on preparing these requirements out in the schools for Plan A. Because if we're prepared for Plan A, we're ready for whatever option in Plan B that this board decides. So again, this is a base foundation of requirements. If you look at the first three, you'll see there's required floor markings and markings inside the building. That is already taking place, by the way, on our 43 campuses across the county. You will see, and one of the requirements has to do with signage. Do you know your 3 W's? I know Miss Churchill does. She preaches those every single day in the hospital. Wash hands, wait 6 feet apart, and importantly, wear a face covering. We cannot underestimate how important that is according to what we're hearing from our public health experts. I want to really focus on the 5th one, which is conduct daily temperature checks of staff, students, and visitors upon arrival to school. Now, here's what that would look like. And in fact, I'm going to encourage you, we're going to put a lot of videos out for us as education and for our public. Very short videos. Our communications department is excellent with those productions. One of those is going to it's actually going to show what it's like when a student steps on a school bus. And that'll actually begin July 15th, I think, Ms. Reed, for some of our students. When they step on that school bus, there's going to be a monitor on that bus that will have a hand thermometer that will project to the forehead and take the temperature. As long as it is under, Mr. Huff, our EOC correspondent, we're going to be hand sanitizing as well. That's going to be provided on that bus. But it's an inner temperature check. At some elementary schools on those campuses, they'll have car rider lines. When the student steps out of the car, the vehicle, there will be someone there, a staff member, that will take that temperature check. If they are not taken at the bus or at either as they enter the bus or leave the bus, they're not taken at the car rider line, they must be taken, this is a requirement, before they enter the building. Some of you may have seen the kiosks that we now have in place up here at Central Office. We're going to be putting them out in the schools. Again, at entrances. The temperature checks have to take place, along with the sanitizer as well, at each of those entrances. I would also, it's not listed here, but I think it's important to reemphasize the facial coverings. Now, the executive order by the governor has already mandated facial coverings for all employees inside our school buildings and on our school buses. It also mandates those facial coverings for students ages 11 and up. Okay? Now, when we think facial coverings, we think cloth mask, which I'm modeling my beautiful Carolina blue mask. We also have produced, through our 3D printers this summer, around 700 face shields, plastic shields. Both of those are facial coverings. So that has been mandated. So the question of the board, because we now have, it is highly recommended, but it's only highly recommended from the governor's executive order for ages 10 and below. Hand sanitizer is referenced on here. And then the last, there must be required a comprehensive plan for thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing. That must be done inside that building, on the school bus, on a frequent and daily basis at a minimum. That's going to be very important. Second list of requirements. Protocol. A lot of requirements on signage in the building. We have a requirement that we've got to begin very soon, which is identify employees and students that are at risk for serious consequences from COVID-19. There is a protocol that must be put in place on the return of a student or an employee that has symptoms and has gone home, that has been diagnosed with COVID-19 but is symptomless, asymptomatic. They've been determined to be in close contact with someone diagnosed with COVID-19. All of those cases for those individuals, we must have a protocol on the timeline for return. Very important. I want to re-emphasize social emotional health. If you'll see that last requirement, access to mental health and wellness support. We have got to put just as much attention on providing support for social, excuse me. Now I'm going to have to leave the building. Back on with my facial covering. We have got to provide equal attention to the social emotional health piece that we do for the academic recovery piece. And that will be huge. Just think about that, about the amount of face-to-face time that we lost completing the 1920 school year.
Before you continue, I'm over here. Could you talk for just a second about the temperature checks, and in particular for the students who are getting on a bus? What happens if a child has a temperature and there is no parent or no family member at the bus to take that child back home and prevent the child from getting on the bus with a fever?
That's a question that's probably been asked over 100 times in these committees, because we have to have a clear plan with that. It goes back to, I think, working, Ms. Pate, with our parents. We have got to, in fact, we're going to be asking a letter of commitment from parents that if your child is sick, if your child has a temperature, and I think the temperature line is 100.4, that they stay at home. But in the event that they arrive at that bus stop and there is no one there, again, we're going to take care of them. Safety is always first, but we've got to work through where they're isolated on that particular bus, what type of plan do we have, maybe to contact the parent with an adult there because of the safety issue. But that is one of those dilemmas that makes transportation so challenging for us. And as we talk about Plan B here, you're going to see that with the bus maximum has been cut in half, so we have further concerns there. But that's an excellent question. I do not have a 100% accurate response yet, but that is something that our teams are working on, and hopefully this is something across the state. This has been one of the major concerns that we've heard across the state as superintendents. So a lot of good minds working on this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I want to go ahead and move you to Plan B, and then I'm going to hand this over to Mrs. Swanger. Remember, I said that Plan A's requirements, and that was not an exhaustive list. There's probably actually about 5 or 6 pages of requirements. But the 2 primary additions that come with Plan B, because remember it's a hybrid, some in, some out as far as students in the building versus remote. You must ensure, this is a requirement, ensure 6 feet of minimum spacing between people. And here's the most important 3 words: at all times. Now, when you think of the challenges and the various age groups inside a school building and the difference of the interiors of those buildings, you can see the challenge already that school officials are going to have. And then finally, a 50% maximum capacity for students and staff inside buildings and school buses. So again, the challenge with transportation. Again, this is going to require us to get information from our parents as soon as possible, to actually get commitments from our parents, especially in terms of riding the school bus, because those numbers are going to be absolutely crucial. Again, we don't know which of the three plans Governor Cooper will declare us in tomorrow, but Plan B certainly does have a long list of challenges. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Swanger, and she's going to talk to you more about Plan B.
Thank you, Dr. Baldwin. Plan B does have significant challenges. As educators, we are all about having all of our students in our building all of the time, K-12. As you can see from the requirements, we can't do that if we have to ensure 50% capacity. I'd like to thank our committee and our facilitators of our committee, Nathan Allison, Carrie Lynch, and Jamie Johnson, who I'm sure are joining us online. They have worked collaboratively with teachers, with parents, with stakeholders, with administrators to find options for you, because we know that it's a very difficult decision that you are going to be having to make for all of us if we are in Plan B and when we are in Plan B. We are so hopeful that we have the mindset now that we have been in a remote learning phase from March through June. And we are so hopeful that we will not experience that long period of time. So Plan B, 6-foot distancing at all times and 50% capacity. What does that look like? First and foremost, our committee strongly recommends that for families who have serious concerns, either health-wise or anxiety-wise, that they may ask to stay remote. What that would mean is any student could be remote if they commit to 1 semester, and we pair a Buncombe County teacher with that student. So we want to ensure families that we have an option for everyone, and this one might make some families more comfortable. So that is a very, very strong recommendation. Then we have 2 options that we have had long and hard and heavy conversations. As Dr. Baldwin mentioned, this is the most complex decision that we've had to encounter in curriculum in a long, long time. So we have 2 options. The first option is an A week and B week model in which we would serve K through 8 students inside the school building on a rotational schedule. So if I'm the principal of M Elementary, I'm going to divide my students in half, and half of those students will come on A week, the other half would come B week, and when they're off on that rotation, they will be experiencing remote learning from home. So it is a blended model, some face-to-face, some remote learning. We will be using the platforms that we used this spring and that we're getting very, very good at, so that there is a communication tool and a platform for students and families to work with teachers. In the K2 arena, we will use Seesaw, which is a learning management system, and our teachers are excellent at these. And then we will have Google Classroom for 3rd graders and up, and then Canvas, which is our secondary model. We have built-in professional development, because even though we are very, very good at it, we can get better. And we also know that we will have new teachers joining us who may or may not have had blended learning opportunities. So with the A week, B week model, K through 8 students are in the buildings, and that's probably about 15,000 students for us if everyone comes back as we're planning. But our high school 9 through 12 students would be remote, and that could be up to 7,000 students that will be home working both synchronous at the same time with their teachers or asynchronous. This will not look like the remote learning that we experienced from March until May or till June. We turned the dime very, very quickly, as Dr. Baldwin said. we were ready for remote learning or for more blended type of learning situations because our technology department worked with each teacher to create a goal back in August. So we were becoming more and more familiar because this is a way to deliver instruction that's more personalized. However, we weren't I think everyone in the state was cautious about going 100% remote on March 16th, and that's what we did. And we know we can get better. With the high school teachers, what they had very strong beliefs about was that I would rather start my high school class remote and put my accountability measures in, my lesson plans, my how I'm taking attendance, how assignments are completed, and how assignments are graded. What was missing, and rightly so, because we were given grace and flexibility with COVID, that we extended a lot of grace and flexibility throughout the state. And the grading practices were developed based on the recommendations or the mandates from the Department of Public Instruction. So remote learning will have more accountability as we move into Plan B if that is a challenge. The positives about the A-week, B-week model would be that there's more continuity and a continuum for building that momentum with students, for having them in front of you for 5 days. So when you think K through 8 students, kindergartners, first graders learning to read, learning to write, learning mathematics, up to 3rd and 4th grade, continuing to practice those skills, learning all of those new standards, there is that momentum of face-to-face for 5 days, and then going home and practicing those skills, but teachers checking in remotely with them at the end of the school day. So there are office hours for kids to check in with their teachers or to get help or to work in a group as they're off on those B weeks. It really provides the same cohort of students in your building at the same time and limits commingling. That's the issue with 50% capacity, keeping 6 feet distancing. We can't have all kids in the building at the same time. There's no way that we can even get them to school in a reasonable amount of time and then keep them inside the building. So again, a lot of controls for safety and access. Although not ideal for childcare, it does allow parents to create plans. They will being provided by a calendar as to which students are on A week, which students are on B week, and parents can make plans accordingly. It's easy to transition from A to B or C to B if that becomes necessary. And it does allow our students to have access to our electives, art, music, band, foreign language, at least every other week. So there is some continuity there in those hands-on courses. If we were to stay on this model for a period of time, possibly 3 to 4 weeks, then we would want to flip-flop and allow our high school students to come into the building periodically to have some check-in with teachers, how are they doing, and get some progress assessing done. I think it would be very critical with this model that we have an orientation. We did this with Mini-Master, and we brought groups of students in. They met their teacher, they got their materials, we made sure their laptops were working, so they were set up for success before they actually started the remote. And although Mini-Master has fewer students, we would use some of those principles that we practiced last week to start them off on the right foot. So that is the first option for Plan B. Again, an 8-week rotation for K-8 with 9-12 being remote. The second option for you to consider focuses on keeping the youngest learners in the building, and that would be the K through 5th grade, with 6th through 12th being remote. So for the K-5 coming to school each and every day, how would we do that to keep them 6 feet apart and meet the capacities? We would have to look at all of the schools buildings within an attendance district. For example, we would look at the Irwin district, and we would look at all of our buildings, and we would space students accordingly. So students might be in their base school at 50%, half of them in one room, half in another classroom, and other certified staff and teacher assistants might be coming and going to keep learning, that continuum going. It might be that if I'm a sixth grader, I might be attending class in the middle school, but again, with my middle school teachers. So there's more travel, there's more itinerant travels. Counselors may have to go from building to building. Administrators would work collectively. If it's a fifth grader, then that intermediate principal will be over his fifth grade students. However, if his students are located at Irwin Middle School, Mr. Molinari would certainly keep safety and work with those students to make sure they would work as a group and that there was safety at all times. The numbers for this model, for K-5, that would be about 10,000 students that would be in our buildings every day and about 13,000 remote. The challenges with this model, again, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders all home, and family concerns as well. Childcare, because some of our middle school families might prefer to have some childcare options. It will take extra time to transition this plan, and there may be additional staff costs based on how we divide students out to meet the mandate of 50%. Again, more staff travel. Probably would have to shift some resources, materials, books, desks, to make sure that everything is age appropriate. And again, you're having students spread out through your attendance district, but you would be with your classroom teacher that's assigned to you. So those are the two models that we will be asking you to consider. Again, we know that this is a very difficult decision, one of our most challenging decisions. There's not a perfect model, but again, we have to go from Plan A, all of those requirements, to Plan B, which means 6 feet or 50% maximum capacity, and 50% maximum capacity. When you think about Plan C that Dr. Baldwin mentioned, that's 100% remote. And again, I've mentioned some of the more structured remote learning plan that we will need to think about, because again, when we began with this COVID phase of learning, teachers automatically went and did everything that we asked. We will have to do, have more structures with scheduling. We are using the Friday Institute's information about how many minutes should a student be logged on, how many minutes should they be synchronous with their teacher. So we have really added some structures in our work with the remote learning plan, and Barry's going to give you an update on that in just a few minutes. So I will be happy to answer any questions.
I have two questions. I've had several parents, especially of seniors, who have contacted me and questioned, if we are doing remote learning, what is the plan that's going to be put in place for them to have contact with their counselors for the college and career counseling piece?
Great question. That's where I think we would have to have a schedule in which those students can be inside the building to work within at least one, if they came in for a week at the end of the month. So week 4, everyone is coming back in. We would ask all of our first period students to come on one day, second period another day, and then we would have a time for counseling and any kind of other social emotional assistance.
Thank you for that one, and here's my other one. Hypothetically, if the governor were to tell us that we are starting school on the most restrictive plan, and then 3 weeks from now said, okay, we can go back to Plan B, what would be our response to that? Would we maintain Plan C for the entire semester, or would we move back to Plan B and transition as he mandates?
Now, I think the timing would be important. If the governor says that we are in Plan C and we can go back to Plan B, which plan are we in? If we're in the option where we have students spread out all over the attendance district, naturally more time to transition back to that classroom, and that would be more cumbersome. If we are on the A week, B week, it would be easier to transition. We would bring that recommendation to the board, and we can stay the most restrictive because you have the ability to always stay the most restrictive. We just can't be less restrictive. Thank you.
We have that ability now, but that also could change in a directive from the governor. I mean, the governor could say, you're in Plan C, you're going to Plan B, you don't have the ability to stay in Plan C. I mean, that could happen to us. Just because we have that ability now doesn't mean we will always have that ability.
And Dr. Baldwin said we are going to experience lots of change.
Yeah.
And we would have to adapt, absolutely.
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions, if I may. I don't want to, if somebody else was getting ready to ask something, didn't want to step on it. Can you go back to the high school in the, just the high schoolers not being on campus, that plan, the first of the two plans you went through? And you said that the teachers, I think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that the teachers were adamant or really wanted this to be the way they started. Help me to understand again what the reasons are for no high schoolers on campus. None in that option.
Concern is, for example, T.C. Robertson High School has 1,500 students. And the logistics of taking even 700 students and moving them safely throughout the buildings, and what happens when they're inside the buildings. It gets very complex because if you start with a first period class, and we have talked option A, B, and C up and down, but where we get stuck, and this is a lot of people stuck, your first period class is English 1. Ninth graders, you've got, even if you have 50% in there, the scheduling in which students leave first period to go to second period, they go all over the building. Even though you try to do your core areas to get those courses in sync. So I know I'm a freshman, I've got to have my English, and then I've got to have math. Well, because of all of the individualization that we've done for the last few years, we've got some kids that go to advanced math, we've got standard math, we've got semester math, we've got year-long math, and they're going everywhere, so there's more commingling, which causes an issue with tracing. And it just, according to our principals, they can't find the right scheduling that would make us be able to follow those two items.
Well, if that's the case, then if we go to, so that's in essence is Plan C, the governor's Plan C, or the state's Plan C. We're never going to be out of that as long as we're not in some type of restrictive measure, because we're never, then what it sounds like, we're never going to bring our high school kids to campus, no matter what happens later on.
And I do think you're going to see that as systems talk about the plans that most LEAs are having this same conversation across the state. Same concerns, all big high schools, keeping kids at a safe distance. Kids will be respectful, the majority of them, they'll wear their mask. It's the traffic patterns of going from here to here to here to here. So we said, okay, what happens if we have all of our kids just stay in that first period all day on Monday?
Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of that at all.
Yeah, it's great if you're an art student and you love art. Oh, I get to be in art all day long. But if you're like me and a high school student, if I were in math all day long, I might not come to school. So we really have tried to be thoughtful. We've got lots of people talking with us and brainstorming, and we have chased down many, many, many ideas, and we just have, it's complex.
Well, respectfully, and there are many in this room that have heard me say this, I disagree.
I know.
And I have to say that publicly because now we're meeting for the public to hear. I happen to have a lot more confidence not confidence. I feel like our high school folks and our kids in our high schools can figure it out and make it work. The same logic of taking 1,500 and splitting it in half, you're also keeping the same amount of space in your building. So you're not dealing with the same amount of commingling, et cetera. You got half the people in a larger space. I think there are less problems with the older age, even with class schedules being different, than there are with their younger ages. And for me, if we're going to try, if the board thinks it's best to try to have kids on campus, I think we figure out a way to do it for everybody. And if we mess it up, then we go to Plan C. If we can't do it, if our schools and our kids can't do it at the high school level, then we also always have the ability to go back. That's exactly what we did with the intercollegiates and the extracurricular starting this summer. I mean, it was clearly laid out to those kids, if we can't do this right, it's going to be gone. And to date, 2 weeks, I know it's not a long period of time, it's not nearly as many people, but they've been able to figure out and make it work. So that's just my thought going forward on.
I think it was also.
I love the logistics of this plan K through 8, I do. And I think it'll work, but I just think we have to try at the high school level too.
I think the high school teachers were very vocal about, and some of our administrators, about starting out the high school course with the fidelity. Our high school teachers struggled last spring because they couldn't have the rigor we encouraged students to attend. We made phone calls, we sent social workers out, principals called families, but we couldn't make kids attend because we couldn't take attendance. We didn't grade as harshly because, again, we were in a health crisis, and we're still in this pandemic crisis. But I think that our high school teachers feel like, and they say, trust us, we will add the rigor, we will engage with our students, find a way for them to come in at some points in time for us to check in and have those face-to-faces, but we feel like we can get the rigor of the coursework for the majority of our independent learners, and we'll have to make some arrangements for our special populations, but that's true in any case. They said, trust us, we can do this.
Is it the recommendation coming out of that committee to also then not have the extracurriculars? If our kids are not on campus, to not have the extracurriculars?
You know, that's where that extracurricular committee is working on that. I do think there will be chances for extracurriculars. I worry about getting kids there. And will kids have ways to get there? But I think those are the things that kids live for, and we need to try to make as many of those things available as we can, again, following the rules.
From where I sit, don't match that we can do the extracurricular but not make an attempt to do the other. I can't, I won't be able to justify that or answer that question in line at Ingalls. I mean, I won't be able to.
I see it differently, and I don't know that right now is the time for us to debate this if we're going to be meeting again later in the week once we know what the governor is doing. But to me, it's the difference of elementary and middle school, and to some degree extracurriculars in high school. You can keep a cohort of kids together. Whereas the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Swanger, you get in a high school where everybody's got all these classes, and all of a sudden it's a commingled beehive. And that's not the fault of the kids or the teachers or somebody who can't keep their hands to themselves or their masks on or whatever. That's the fact that high school is designed more like college, and developmentally that's appropriate, where you're going to the classes that are appropriate for you, and they're all over the building, and they're with all different students in each period. Whereas in elementary and middle, we can keep them together in their little clumps. And so that's how I see it, and that's what I would explain in the grocery store behind my mask, facing the right direction in the aisle if I had to do that. So I don't feel like, to me, the extracurriculars are more like middle and high school, where we can keep kids in their groups. And that's the same with athletics this summer.
Well, we have athletics going well now, and, hopefully we've got to think in terms of that this might not be with us for the long periods of time that we're all thinking of, because that's been our recent experience. Again, it's not an easy task. It's the best two options we can bring to you to follow the law, and we will hope that the governor's announcement tomorrow will help enlighten some of those decision points. I'd like for Jennifer to come forward and talk about the good news is practicing as we get younger children back in the building, and she's going to share with you what Jumpstart will look like.
Mrs. Swanger, before
Yes.
you step away, I would like to make one comment. I think that it is incumbent upon this board to respect the fidelity, the research, and the hard work that this committee has done to make these recommendations to us. And while we may not agree with everything that came out of those committees, I defer to them personally because they're the ones who did the work, and I can sit back here and I can have my own opinion, but I personally am going to go with the recommendations that the committee made, and if they gave us these two options for Plan B, then I respect that.
And I too appreciate all the work that's gone into this and your time to present it to us.
This has been well over 120 hours worth of work, and the devil's in the details. We're not finished. We work for the pleasure of the board. Whatever you come back with, we will have to expand those committees, so that 200 number that Dr. Baldwin gave you will significantly go up, because we do have to make very specific plans of how to make whatever plan we're under work.
And I agree with Donna. If it's 120 hours for you, it's 120 hours for all those 20 people that are on that committee. And it just grows and grows and grows. But thank you. All right, Ms. Reed, let's enlighten us here. We're going to jump start, huh?
All right, now we can jump start. So we are well on our way to planning our Summer Jumpstart program. Summer Jumpstart is designed to provide a supplemental summer learning program for students in rising first through fifth grades whose learning has been negatively affected by the impacts of COVID-19. We did receive a budget for Summer Jumpstart, and I'm going to simplify that budget just a bit to say that at least 50% of the funds that we received must be spent on students who are rising third and fourth graders. So those students were in second and third grade in the 1920 school year. The remaining funds must be spent on rising first, second, and fifth graders. Our Jumpstart program will focus on reading, math, and social emotional supports. We did have options from the state in how to carry out our plan. One of those options was to have a completely face-to-face program. The second option was to have a completely remote learning Jumpstart program. The third option was to provide professional development for teachers in the science of reading. And the fourth option was a hybrid that involved all three. Buncombe County chose option 4, so we are offering choices to our families for face-to-face instruction, remote learning, which includes virtual and paper pencil options, as well as providing our teachers professional development. We will be starting that professional development on the first 2 teacher work days of our Jumpstart program, which will be July 13th and 14th. And we'll continue that professional development in our professional development day on August 11th for all of our elementary teachers. Here are a few important facts that might be of interest to you about our program. We do start with those teacher work days, July 13th and 14th. And we will have a total of 10 student days, July 15th through July 28th. And the student hours for the program will be 8 o'clock to 1 o'clock each day. We will be operating the program at 20 school sites, and we will be serving students from 23 different elementary schools. We will offer these options to over 6,000 students in Buncombe County schools. And our face-to-face in-class instruction will have a ratio of 9 students to 1 teacher in each classroom. We will be employing approximately 200 teachers, including counselors and lead teachers, and a lead teacher is like an instructional coach. We will be hiring 23 bus drivers and 42 monitors, and those monitors will help us on the bus with our health screenings and temperature checks. They will also help us in the school building with those health screenings as students exit their car in the mornings, as well as lunch delivery and a lot of other operational things during the day. We will have lunch and breakfast served to all students attending face-to-face. And of course, we have a lot of health and safety measures in place. Many of those we talked about earlier already today. Our curriculum, as I mentioned earlier, will involve math, reading, writing, and social emotional learning, and of course, a lot of regular movement and play breaks throughout the day for our young learners. Our next steps are just to continue strong communication with the families whose students are eligible. Of course, our staff to ensure clear guidance for health and safety and student learning expectations, as well as how we as staff can support the social emotional needs of our children. We want them to have a strong start for the 2021 school year, and our ultimate goal is for them to leave every day of Jumpstart with a smile on their face, happy to be back in the school building. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
All right, now Barry Pace will be up to talk about our remote learning plan.
Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Baldwin, it's my pleasure to be here to talk about the remote instruction plan. So the General Assembly requires each public school unit to submit a remote instruction plan by July 20th, 2020. The Department of Public Instruction created the template for that plan and published it around June the 5th. That has 17 components, 15 of which are required, 2 are optional. Buncombe County Schools is submitting information for all 17 components. The plan is centered around the fact that a minimum of 5 remote instruction days are required by the legislation. And so this plan creates a framework for how you're handling those days, but we all recognize that it is much bigger than that and becomes a framework for how you handle the schedule, depending on what you guys decide and what the governor puts in place. So I want to emphasize that this remote instruction plan is developing as a component of our larger Buncombe County Schools reopening plan. Certainly you've heard about the collaborative effort involved there, and this remote instruction plan is no different. It's definitely a team effort. The plan that is linked off of the board agenda is a living, breathing document, and we are now welcoming public feedback for the remote instruction plan. And each of the 17 components has a link right beneath it, directly beneath it, to a Google form where anyone can submit feedback for that component. So we welcome feedback from our stakeholders.
Price, did you say that was linked on our agenda? I don't think it is linked.
Okay, well, we'll get that link posted.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And then we do invite the stakeholders to provide feedback. So we know that approximately 1,500 of our students are immunocompromised. We also understand and realize that based on survey data, approximately 20% of families may choose remote-only learning this fall. And obviously that is subject to change based on the current conditions. We are committed, whatever the case may be, to providing an optimal as possible learning opportunity for all of our students. And our teachers and staff are planning and they are ready to provide hybrid face-to-face and remote instruction with accountability for students for as long as necessary due to COVID-19, with the appropriate accommodations and differentiation. So that's the commitment that we're all making as educators with Buncombe County Schools. We know we have to overcome lots of challenges and hurdles, one of which is connectivity. So most of you have heard, that we deployed almost 1,250 cellular homework hotspots this year, 600 of which approximately were deployed after March 13th. So we had about 600 prior to March 13th in our homework hotspot program. One of the things that I have been working hard on is to solve the equation for students who do not have internet access at home and who also do not have cellular coverage. So that is a multifaceted problem, and there are folks, had a meeting with the county yesterday, Robert Frisbee and myself, with Tim Love, brainstorming, problem solving in this area. Of course, connectivity is an economic issue as well, and so there are lots of partners, hopefully, that will come to the table here. One of the things that I'm working on right now immediately is, and with our board attorney as well, is can we spin up a satellite homework hotspot and be able to provide service where there is no cellular coverage for a student who does not have internet at home. And so I think, we're going to be able to have solutions there. And in some cases, there might be a need for a wired solution if that is available, such that it can handle at least standard definition video. So that's where we're setting the bar, is the connectivity has to be able to handle standard definition video to support the video conferencing and screencastify videos and things like that. So we're working hard on that.
Barry, before you change, can you go back to the third bullet point on that previous page?
Sure.
Can you explain that again? BCS teachers and staff are planning now?
We have, a number of staff that are working on different types of professional development, and I'll touch on that a little bit in the
Okay, well, no, if you've got more with it, if there's more to come, just go ahead.
I think regardless of the schedule that ultimately comes about, we know that our teachers have to be prepared to be able to provide instruction, the highest quality instruction to a student who's here one day, potentially home the next, for however long. So I think, from the mindset, we're all prepared for that. It's a process, of course, to get everybody up to speed, but I think we understand.
We've got enough time in the 5 days prior to the start of school, because it sounds like there's a lot of changes with the remote part of this that are going to be different than they were in March. And is that something we have thought or talked about, paying people to come in earlier, or is the 5 days enough time to be ready from the 10th to the 17th?
Right. Well, so Suzanne and I are engaged in conversations related to that. And of course, we have things happening like the BCS STEAM conference, which will be happening again this year, August 6th. Our annual STEAM conference will be fully virtual this year. And our keynote speaker for that is going to be Matt Miller, who has developed the Remote Learning 101 video course that a lot of people have heard about. And so we're excited about that.
Thank you.
So let me address some of those questions. So in this slide, we know that the learning management system is such an important piece to the puzzle, and that we need some consistency, especially at our elementary grades. And so what we've decided to do is our K2 students and teachers will use Seesaw as their learning management system. Our third through intermediate students, so third through intermediate, will use Google Classroom. And then our middle through high school students will use Google Classroom or Canvas. There are situations where, for example, Project Lead the Way courses, some CTE courses are required to use one LMS or another, for example, Canvas or Microsoft Teams. So those will be available, but what we're doing is the digital learning facilitators have created a custom BCS-specific Canvas course for each of these platforms. So the Seesaw is called Seesaw Pioneer, and that's 1 hour. It will be required for all K2 teachers. Likewise, we have a custom Canvas course that has been created by the DLFs for Google Classroom as well as Canvas. And so we've decided and are working on making those BCS specific. In addition to that, all teachers K-12 will be required to take an additional 1 hour course called BCS Best Practices for Remote Learning. So all of those professional development courses are in Canvas. The Seesaw is approximately 1 hour. The Google Classroom is approximately 1.5 hours. The Canvas is approximately 2 hours, so that's why it says between 1 and 2 hours. And then the best practices for remote learning is 1 hour. So those will be required. And then we will, of course, encourage teachers, new teachers, beginning teachers, anybody that wants to and can, to take the video courses that are available from Matt Miller as well. So we'll encourage everybody to do that, as well as we'll encourage everyone to obtain Google Level 1 Certified Educator, et cetera, those types of certifications beyond this required training. And likewise, we know that our teachers have to reach out to parents. So the digital learning facilitators are also creating videos for these tools that will go up on our Virtual Days website for parents. But at the same time, we know that not everyone's going to hear about that. And so we know that our teachers will need to reach out to parents and offer an orientation the week of August 17th, just like they're going to do for students, to orient them in these tools. So that will be a part of the process. So Ms. Swanger mentioned these time frames. So according to the Friday Institute and the Kansas Continuous Learning 2020 model, the optimal amount of time for students to participate in synchronous instruction, for example, web conference, on a remote learning day is as follows. So pre-K is about 30 minutes. K1 is 45 minutes. Grades 2 through 3 is 60 minutes. 4-5 is 90 minutes. And for grades 6 through 12, 30 minutes per teacher. So what this is going to require is going to require us to adapt how we do instruction, and we're going to need to do that equitably. And so a flipped classroom model where you're using videos, screencastify videos, is one way that we'll accomplish that. But principals will develop schedules for synchronous instruction that allow for flexibility and consistency, but avoid overlap and fatigue. So each principal will have to come up with, based on their grade level, something that works for their teachers, creates windows where they can have synchronous time for whole group or small group or one-on-one, web conferencing and face-to-face instruction as well, and be able to coordinate those schedules, but still allow some flexibility. So what we're saying is that in order to do this equitably, the remote instruction plan says that teachers essentially adopt a remote instruction plan model for all of the students that they are currently teaching and responsible for. That involves videos and things like that they post to their learning management system for students to access on demand, pause, rewatch, etc. And then they provide a individualized, focused support for helping face-to-face and fully remote students, as well as hybrid students, master the standards. With that, we know that students with disabilities may require additional face-to-face time. And so we encourage the board to consider our students with disabilities, and we're certainly taking that in terms of the remote instruction plan, weighted heavily. And so with that, I want to see if there's any questions.
Man today, but I have a question.
Little quiet, Donna Pate over here.
Several weeks ago, David Thompson, Shannon Martin, and I facilitated a parent meeting, and one of the parents raised a point I had never thought about, but her family does not utilize technology, or up to this point had not. No TV, don't like computers, etc. And I'm sure there are other families out there who are the exact same way. Are there any options that we could consider if we have to address that in any way? Are there any options available for parents who are not into technology and don't want their children exposed to it?
So we have had situations similar to what you are talking about, where accommodations have to be made. So in the macro level, teachers in that situation are asked to accommodate those requests in the best manner possible that they can. So that could mean a paper-based packet that gets sent home or picked up. Or it could mean, some type of alternative assignments. So, I think there's a lot that you're giving up in that situation, certainly, but if that is a parent's prerogative, then, we will try to accommodate that as best we can and try to do it, honestly, as the best percentage of what they would be receiving in terms of instruction with the technology, because it is so integral and ubiquitous.
Donna, did that mom say what they do when the child goes to school? Because there's technology in the school in the regular, were they avoiding it in some way, somehow in school?
We did not talk about that. The bigger concern, well, she had a twofold concern. One was the amount of time that it required for the child to be on technology. Mm-hmm. And the second thing was the reliance on YouTube for some of the instruction.
I think if we go back a few slides to the recommendations from the Friday Institute, some of that is addressed in terms of the time frames. There are projects, though, that are going to be more difficult to complete without the access to the technology and without access to YouTube. Well, accommodate that situation if it's temporary or if it's more long-term. And that's, we have sent the packets home like we did in March as well.
Well, I think one piece too, that this is going to look totally different from how it looked in March. And the instructions certainly will be different. So I think that just listening to all of this and the conversations that we've had over the past months about this, I would feel more comfortable as a parent knowing that things, they're definitely going to be different.
right? We've had time to plan and work through some of the, details in terms of how you deliver this. And, I think ultimately, we're as ready as any school district to deliver all the way around. And I will say, and want to emphasize, that, we are planning to do this with accountability as well. So I think that's a big difference between Q4 of last year and Q1 and on as we move forward.
Very good point. Thank you.
Max?
Mr. Pace, if you would back up one slide, please. The thing that concerns me a bit about the remote learning is that there's been much written about learning styles, individual learning styles, and we all may have our own preferences and do better. Some of us can see things and understand. Some of us hear it. Maybe it's a combination of both. Some do a lot better if they have hands-on kinetic kind of experiences. And I think we really need to emphasize, my fellow board members, I would just say that bullet item 2 and 3 says teacher instruction style focus more on individual support. And I think they need to take into consideration that you may have a student who has been a very strong academic student in the classroom, but you put them in this environment of total remote learning and they may struggle. And I think that rather than just saying, they're not interested or whatever, we need to be sensitive to that. And I'm sure instructional staff would be, but I would just encourage that. And it's almost like we talk about students with disabilities. You put a person in a different environment and that different environment becomes their disability. In other words, they just can't quite grasp the material. So I just simply say that I would encourage, if we go down this road, that there is adequate additional support available for all students, and some that we don't know that's going to have trouble yet.
Right. So. And we had teachers who, found, that students who normally, for whatever reason, were struggling in the face-to-face classroom, that they were thriving in the spring. And vice versa, as you say. So I think it really is this opportunity that we have. I like to see silver linings. I like to look for them. And one of those silver linings is the opportunity to personalize instruction. And, it takes work, but it is something that each of these subcommittees have discussed. Certainly, I've been in double-digit meetings now with the Instructional Delivery Committee, and this exact thing has come up multiple times, as well as in comments from our teachers on the remote instruction plan, feedback from them about this specific issue, and they've seen it go both directions. Okay. And so I think mentally they're prepared.
Right. Thank you.
Another thing that seems really important to me, I serve on the communications subcommittee, and one thing that Stacia has really emphasized is we will all need to do a good job of communicating the difference between what this is and what we did in the spring. That this is not, there's more accountability, there will be more grades, there will be more probably specific times that students need to show up for this. And I hope that you all can do a good job of training us to be able to help get that word out, to help folks understand that if we do have to go into Plan C, or if high schoolers are learning remotely, it is not going to be like what they saw in the spring. And whatever language, branding, whatever you can provide to us that we can help get out to the world about how this is different and what we call it now that's different, I think that will be really helpful in getting that into the minds of our families.
Mm-hmm. The outreach is going to be huge.
Some of the value too of having our students back in the building in some form or fashion is that from everything I hear, that the instruction itself will try to help with that transition. We'll better prepare our students for that transition into remote, maybe for a week or maybe for an extended period of time. We didn't have that. I mean,
Right.
I think, again, this was thrown on us. We responded to the best of our ability, but I don't believe anyone has ever 100% equated the remote learning, virtual instruction model with the advantages of the face-to-face teacher-student, and I don't think we should go there. But what you're going to see with this is even for those parents that choose, they're anxious, they just don't feel comfortable about sending their students back. We're going to meet them. Our job is to serve our kids and our families. So we will provide that, but it will be a far higher quality model than we were able to provide under the circumstances for the last 3 months of the school year.
Right, and we need to continue to get that message across, not just once school starts, but all the way from now until then.
And I believe parents ought to expect that. I think parents should expect that, that higher rigor and for their students to succeed, not just for that semester, but as it adds together with whatever they're seeking for an outcome when they graduate. Okay, Dr. Baldwin, excuse
If I
me.
could just have one more second, I want to say, to that extent, yes, we're going to have to communicate extensively on very specific things and broadly. One of the things is, when we enter August, it's going to be, okay, this is the plan for third graders to come, especially if they're not all planning to come to the building. This is the process for third graders to turn in their one-to-one device in order to get issued a different one-to-one device so that we have iPads for kindergartners and communicate, okay, kindergartners, this is the time frame where you're going to need to come and pick up your one-to-one device. So specific things like that, as well as higher level things, we'll need to communicate often. And I will say this too, for our local, state, and national, everybody's going to have to still be very flexible, because when this all goes online, internet service providers across the country are going to have a week of how are we going to deal with this. Likewise, every computer supplier and manufacturer in the world is sitting on hundreds of thousands of orders for devices. And, whatever that backlog takes for the supply chain to work itself out, we again are blessed, and thank you to all of you for your leadership in approving the Digital Learning Initiative, and to Dr. Baldwin and Mrs. Swanger and Mr. Huff for their leadership, because without that, Buncombe County Schools would not be prepared like we are for this.
Thank you. And we've had this conversation several times today. It's the strength of our staff that makes this successful. And we all, and all of you, work together to make that happen, and this board's very appreciative of that. Thank you.
That reminds me, I can't thank my team enough for all the distribution, the laptop distribution, the hotspot distribution, the digital learning team, for putting together the professional development, for training teachers, for working individually with teachers. They are an absolute joy to work with.
And we appreciate it all. Dr. Baldwin? Here? Have we questioned out? We are going to recess from this meeting and project that we will have another meeting after the governor speaks to us. So it's been fun, boys and girls. Let's go to recess.
Why don't you go ahead and have a motion to recess?
I need a motion?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I move that we go to recess.
And
I'll meet
stay-
you on the playground.
plan to reset, the time that you plan to come back?
And
Which
I
will be-
further move that we reconvene in 2 days after we get the governor's announcement.
Specifically July 2nd at 2 PM in this room? Is that accurate?
Correct?
July 2nd at 2 PM in this room?
I move all of that, Madam Chair.
Governor's decision.
What she said, I move it.
Exactly, I understand where you're coming from. Could I get a second on that? Thank you, Ms. Pate, and now we will vote. Cindy? Aye. She's a yes. We have 2 board members that have had to leave, Max?
Aye.
And Donna?
Aye.
And Peggy?
No, I'm here.
Okay, so, and that's Ann, and so the motion passes. Thank you very much, Ms. Lopez. Thanks to all the technology that made it go.